J'ouvre maintenant la séance.
Good day, everyone. Welcome to the 50th meeting of the Public Accounts Committee of the House of Commons, pursuant to Section 108.3. The committee is meeting today in the context of its study on Report 6, Arctic Waters Surveillance of the 2022 Reports 5 to 8 of the Auditor General of Canada.
From the Office of the Auditor General, Andrew Hayes, nice to see you and your team today. The Deputy Auditor General, Nicholas Swales, Principal, Chantal Thibodeau, Director. From the Department of Fisheries and Oceans, we have Annette Gibson, the Deputy Minister. Hello. Along with Mario Pelletier, Commissioner, Canada Coast Guard. Good day. Department of Public Works and Government Services, Paul Thompson, Deputy Minister. Good day. And Simon Page, Assistant Deputy Minister, Defence and Marine Procurement. Each of our departments will have 5 minutes each. As members know, we're going to break, or not break, but the last 30 minutes is for committee business. So today, fair warning, I'm going to watch the clock closely. Doing so will allow us to get through 3 rounds and end at 12:30 or thereabouts. So turning to Mr. Hayes, you have the floor for 5 minutes, please, sir.
Mr. Chair, thank you for this opportunity to discuss our report on the surveillance of Canada's Arctic waters, which was tabled in the House of Commons on November 15th. I would like to acknowledge that this hearing is taking place on the traditional unceded territory of the Algonquin Anishinaabe people. Joining me today are Nicholas Swales, the principal who is responsible for the audit, and Chantal Thibodeau, the director who led the audit team. In recent decades, Canada's Arctic waters have become more accessible as summer sea ice has declined and navigation technologies have improved. This has generated interest and competition in the region, significantly increasing ship traffic and affecting local communities. Growing maritime traffic increases the risk of unauthorized access, illegal activities, and safety and pollution incidents. For this audit, we wanted to know whether key federal organizations built the maritime domain awareness needed to respond to safety and security risks and incidents associated with increasing vessel traffic in Arctic waters. No federal organization is solely responsible for the surveillance of Arctic waters. In our audit, we included the 5 organizations that are mainly responsible: Transport Canada, Fisheries and Oceans Canada, the Canadian Coast Guard, National Defence, and Environment and Climate Change Canada. We found that over the past decade, these organizations have repeatedly identified gaps in the surveillance of Arctic waters, but they have not taken action to address them. These gaps include limited capabilities to build a complete picture of ship traffic in the Arctic and the inability to track and identify vessels that don't use digital tracking systems, either because they don't have to or because they are not complying with requirements. Collaboration is important to mitigate gaps in maritime domain awareness. Coastal communities contribute information through direct observation. Federal initiatives such as the Marine Security Operations Center in Halifax also play a key role. However, we found that weaknesses in the mechanisms that support information sharing, decision-making, and accountability affected the center's efficiency. La surveillance des eaux arctiques s'appuie sur divers types.
Arctic waters surveillance relies on several types of equipment, such as satellites, aircraft, and ships. We found that much of this equipment is old and its renewal has been delayed to the point that some equipment will likely need to be retired before it can be replaced. This is the situation for the Canadian Coast Guard's icebreakers and Transport Canada's single patrol airplane. They are near the end of their service lives and likely to be retired before new equipment can be delivered. Satellites are also nearing the end of their service lives and currently do not meet surveillance needs. Replacements in all cases are many years away. We also found that the infrastructure projects aimed at supporting the surveillance aircraft and offshore patrol ships were delayed. For instance, the Nanisivik Naval Facility intended to support government vessels in Arctic waters is behind schedule and has been reduced in scope to the point that it will operate only about 4 weeks per year. As a result, Canadian Navy ships may not be resupplied where and when needed. Our 2021 audit of the National Shipbuilding Strategy raised concerning delays in the delivery of the combat and non-combat ships that Canada needs to meet its domestic and international obligations. That audit also noted that further delays could result in several vessels being retired before new vessels are operational. In this audit, we found that these delays persist. Effective surveillance in the Arctic relies on marine vessels, aircraft, and satellites, all of which are aging. The government urgently needs to address these long-standing issues and put equipment renewal on a sustainable path to protect Canada's interests in the Arctic. Mr. Chair, this concludes my opening remarks. We would be pleased to answer any questions the committee may have. Thank you. Thank you very much, Mr. Hayes.
Please.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. Good morning, committee members. We're very pleased to appear here. My colleague Mario Pelletier and I, Commissioner of the Coast Guard, and we're also very pleased to be here with our colleagues from other departments. First of all, I'd like to thank the Auditor General for providing recommendations that respond to safety and security risks and incidents associated with increased vessel traffic in Arctic waters. Pêche et Océans Canada et la Garde côtière canadienne.
Fisheries and Oceans Canada and the Canadian Coast Guard agree with the audit recommendations. We note that these echo similar recommendations made in the 2014 Auditor General's report on marine navigation in the Canadian Arctic. We are committed to working with partners to address gaps in Arctic marine or maritime domain awareness and increase information sharing. Arctic surveillance in support of sovereignty and security is a whole-of-government endeavor, which integrates multiple departments' capabilities. To support Canada's presence in the Arctic, we will continue to collaborate with federal and provincial territorial partners, First Nations, Inuit, and Métis communities, as well as industry, to provide the assets, programs, tools, and people needed to support Canada's surveillance, presence, and maritime security interests. We're also committed to developing an Arctic maritime security strategy in collaboration with key security partners to provide risk-based Arctic marine domain awareness solutions.
Important to maritime domain awareness. Strengthening and renewing our fleet is one of the key actions we are taking to support security and sovereignty in the North. Investments for icebreaking and ice-capable vessels announced through the National Shipbuilding Strategy include 16 multi-purpose vessels, 6 program icebreakers, 2 Arctic offshore patrol ships, and 2 polar icebreakers. These new vessels will be a significant contribution to exercising Canada's sovereignty in the Arctic and in supporting Canada's on-water Arctic science capabilities by performing critical icebreaking services, providing vessel escorts and commercial and fishing harbor ice breakouts, and ensuring the safe transport of vital supplies, goods, and people in Canadian waters. Plus précisément, les brises-glaces du programme joueront aussi un rôle primordial.
More specifically, the program icebreakers will also help provide other essential services to Canadians, including search and rescue, environmental response, maritime security, and humanitarian missions. The polar icebreakers will be larger and more powerful than the current heavy icebreakers. And they'll enable the Coast Guard to operate in all areas of the Arctic throughout the year with enhanced capabilities to support a variety of tasks, including to support our on-water science program and northern sovereignty. In order to maintain services to Canadians while new ships are being built, the Coast Guard has put in place interim measures to mitigate anticipated gaps until the new ships are ready. These interim measures are twofold. First, we're making significant investments to extend the life of our current fleet. Known as Vessel Life Extensions, or VLEs, we safely prolong the life of our fleet to ensure that Coast Guard personnel continue to have the proper equipment to perform their crucial work until new vessels arrive. And second, we've acquired 4 interim vessels so that when an existing vessel is taken out of service for this vessel life extension process, we have replacement assets to maintain Coast Guard's operational excellence in service delivery.
Remains actively engaged with its domestic partners on Arctic security through its contributions to Canada's multi-agency maritime security operation centres, known as MSOCs. These centres bring together the Coast Guard, National Defence, the Royal Canadian Mounted Police, Canada Border Services Agency, Transport Canada, and Fisheries and Oceans Canada. As an integrated component of the government security apparatus, MSOCs identify and report on maritime activities that represent a potential threat to the sovereignty, security, and safety of Canada. The Coast Guard's contribution to MSOCs includes its expertise and information on maritime vessel traffic. With the tremendous number of vessels traveling within a few kilometres of our coastlines, it's imperative for reasons of security and safety that these vessels be identified and monitored. And our Marine Communications and Traffic Services, or MCTS, centres monitor and liaise with all marine traffic and provide crucial information to MSOCs to help ensure the safety and security of Canada's waterways, including in the Arctic. In collaboration with our MSOC partners, current efforts are focused on information sharing and the upcoming MSOC third-party review. This review will focus on analysing current MSOC functions and outputs to identify and mitigate gaps in providing maritime domain awareness. In closing, DFO is keenly aware of that maritime domain awareness in Canada's Arctic is critical to ensuring that we can decisively respond to incidents that threaten our safety, security, environment, and economy. And that is why DFO and the Canadian Coast Guard will continue to work closely with all of our partners to improve safety and security in Canadian waters. Thank you. Look forward to your questions.
Thank you very, very much. Mr. Thompson, you have the floor for 5 minutes, please.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. As my colleague has noted, Public Services and Procurement Canada also welcomes the Auditor General's report and is committed to working with its partners to ensure Canada's Arctic waters are safe and secure. And we are in full agreement with the Office of the Auditor General that such equipment must be acquired in a timely manner. For Public Services and Procurement Canada, that means supporting our federal partners with the procurement of equipment and capabilities needed for effective Arctic water surveillance, which is being done through Canada's National Shipbuilding Strategy. The National Shipbuilding Strategy is one of the largest and most significant endeavours undertaken by Canada. It is focused not only on equipping the Royal Canadian Navy and the Canadian Coast Guard with much-needed vessels, but also on strengthening Canada's shipyards and rebuilding Canada's marine industry, which is an important source of high-skilled jobs. Cela comprend les petites et...
That includes small and medium-sized businesses, which make up some 90% of Canadian marine industry firms. Mr. Chair, the shipyards that are awarded contracts under the NSS are responsible for sourcing things like materials and technology for their respective shipbuilding projects. Through the provisions of the government's Industrial and Technological Benefits Policy, which focuses on generating economic benefits here at home, hundreds of Canadian businesses are securing that work. And those businesses are growing, investing in innovation and getting traction in export markets.
driver and will successfully delivering a number of vessels as well as completing needed repair and refit work, the strategy is also facing significant challenges. Due to the pandemic and other global events, we have several new factors to deal with, such as inflation, commodity pricing, supply chain disruptions that have all affected the cost and the availability of materials. This is on top of increasing labor shortages. Mr. Chair, the report from the Office of the Auditor General is quite valuable as we work to counter the impact of these challenges. I would like to give an update on the action plan, which addresses the recommendations provided to our department. Une partie de notre plan d'action de gestion.
Part of our management action plan to address the report's findings outlines ways to make sure delivery schedules are more accurate, including by making improvements to how we monitor and report on the progress of the projects. The goal is to identify potential delays and cost overruns earlier in the process. The action plan maps out continued efforts to ensure that we are properly and effectively integrating schedule, costs, and scope in how we measure performance.
Implementation of this management action plan, the government's efforts to acquire equipment in a timely manner is also supported by the integration of a third shipyard into the National Shipbuilding Strategy. Bringing on a third shipyard is a significant factor in addressing the concerns raised in the AG's report under discussion today. Specifically, the third yard will be responsible for building one of the 2 polar icebreakers and 6 program icebreakers for the Canadian Coast Guard. In June of this year, the Government of Canada announced the beginning of negotiations with Chantier Davy of Lévis, Quebec, to become the third strategic shipbuilding partner under the NSS. That process is in the very final stages of completion. Contracts for each polar and program icebreaker will be negotiated following the signature of an umbrella agreement with the third shipyard. And of course, the lessons we have learned from the revised approach to project management, costing, and scheduling will be applied as we draw up and manage these new contracts. In conclusion, Mr. Chair, I think it is also worth noting that we have seen around the world shipyards typically increase their efficiency over time as they mature, and Canadian shipyards are no exception. This is particularly true with longer production runs of ships. For example, Canada has seen good progress in the Arctic and offshore patrol ships program, with 3 ships delivered so far and the cost per ship decreasing. As we continue to deliver on the NSS and as the Canadian industry continues to gain more experience along the way, we expect to see even more efficiencies. Mr. Chair, I can tell you that PSPC will continue to work with its partners to mitigate the project delivery risks for the NSS so that the Royal Canadian Navy and the Canadian Coast Guards get the vessels they need to do the job. Thank you, and I'll be happy to take your questions.
Thank you all very much. Turning now to our first round, each of the 4 members will have 6 minutes each. And again, I'm sorry to repeat this, but I will be watching the clock very closely. And I will have to cut witnesses off if you don't leave them ample time to answer your questions. On that note, Mr. McCauley, you have the floor for 6 minutes.
Thanks, Mr. Chair. Witnesses, thank you for this. Mr. Hayes, Mr. Swales, thank you for another depressing report. I think he could have titled it like a whole of government failure as the title of this report. You know, we have a failure to buy equipment on time, a failure to retain our pilots or even train new pilots, clear failure to secure the North. I mean, this is an absolutely, abysmal report. I don't think I have a different word for it. We have a government and bureaucracy. We actually saw them with opening statements. We appear to think that making announcements is actually going to get ships built. We have delay after delay after delay on the ships. The icebreakers are a decade late. AOPS delayed. Everything is delayed. We're running out of pilots to fly the few planes we have left. We have basically what turns out to be a politically motivated purchase of the Kingfisher search and rescue plane that cannot fly in Canada, that the RCAF doesn't want. We have AOPS that the Navy doesn't want and can't actually patrol for a large part of the year, and that's when these ships are actually working. We know there's the diesel issues, water issues. We have committees, when you read in this report, committees that repeatedly identified issues, but the government refused to act on, departments that can't share information among each other, work plans developed with no implementation plans or timelines to go with them, and then no monitoring of those implementation plans, and then a plan to develop an Arctic security strategy that never got completed. And you think it just cannot get worse and worse and worse, and yet along comes the government to say, you know, hold my beer. And then sitting back as the Chinese float, you know, 99 red balloons over into our territory. Mr. Hayes, Mr. Swales, like, is there any redeeming information from the government's performance you can share with us out of this report besides the government recognizes it's an issue? I've read through it. I don't see the action. I don't see anything but announcements and witnesses around the table saying, patting themselves on the back for what a great job they're doing, but nothing's getting done. We've got Russia aggressive. We have, obviously, the Chinese are aggressive. And yet we're, what, a decade, 2 decades away from being able to secure the North. Is there anything good in this report?
Thank you for the question. I'll start with reiterating the fact that we identified that long-standing issues hadn't been addressed in our report. However, I would say that the efforts taken to expand or extend the life of some of the equipment so that time can be available for the new equipment to be purchased is a good step. Mind you, there's not a lot of time to spare if there's further delays. In terms of other positives, I would say that at this point in time, the work that's being done by the departments to consider contingencies, the bringing on of a third shipyard is a positive development. However, again, we've seen that with the previous shipyards, it took 7 years after the agreements were negotiated for a ship to be produced. So time is running out.
Right. And I guess that is the crux of it. I mean, the biggest accomplishment we can state is we're going to extend the life of our already old equipment. The Aurora, how long can that be extended? I think it's service to 2030, is it? Anyone?
So I'll
Mr.
take
Thompson.
that question.
We might as well have an OGO meeting here at the same time.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So PSPC, of course, is the contracting agent for activities like the maintenance and sustaining of the Aurora. DND would be better positioned to speak to the long-term plans on it, but we do have some measures in place. Simon could elaborate on
Yeah, we
the work we're doing in
we
support.
finished the upgrade on the Aurora. Is that correct?
There's ongoing work as well.
Yeah, thank you for the question, Mr. Chair. We do have a specific project called the Aurora Incremental Modernization Project, and that's still ongoing. We're putting the final touches on this project as we speak with the OEMs that are concerned, and we target date for that is 2024.
How late?
You
or
one
how
minute.
long? Yeah. How long will the life cycle be extended till?
That's, as my deputy said, it's more a question for DND when they come to this
Is
venue. but
PSPC involved yet in the P8 acquisition? Is there like a working group set up or project group set up yet?
I could speak to that. So we're in the options analysis and requirements definition phase, and the P8 is an active option that's under consideration, as ministers have noted. So.
Sake of argument, if we signed it tomorrow, would we get it in time before the Aurora's timeout?
I don't know if we have a potential timeline, Simon, on, I think that's all part of the options analysis, I would say. So I think it's hard to say at this point exactly what the relative timelines would be on the P8 versus other options.
I'll cede my second and a half to the Liberals.
Very good. Thank you, Mr. McCauley. Ms. Shipp, you have the floor for 5 minutes, please.
Okay. The Arctic's water surveillance report is, I think, really timely right now, given recent developments and also with a warming climate. It's important that we draw attention to what we can do to increase our Canadian security, economic impact, as well as the environmental vigilance. So I want to thank you, Deputy Auditor General, the Auditor General, as well as your team for bringing forth such important recommendations in this report. My first question is to Ms. Gibbons. How are you addressing the report's findings that there's a lack of adequate infrastructure in the Arctic?
I will ask Commissioner Pelletier to elaborate a bit more on this. But we've been doing a number of different things to improve infrastructure. I mean, certainly the creation of an Arctic region within Fisheries and Oceans and the Coast Guard is a major step to having a greater presence. We have a site in Rankin Inlet, which we are transitioning to be a larger, and Mario can speak to this, a larger, more functional site than it is at present. And we have been doing a lot with Indigenous communities in the north, expanding the Coast Guard Auxiliary, and with that, we provide funding to purchase community boats for communities to be able to have more of an on-sea presence. So that, of course, is expanding the eyes and ears on activity in the north. But I'll ask Mario to expand a little bit on that.
Okay, thanks for the question. And just on that last point, we went from 9 Coast Guard Auxiliary unit up north 5 or 6 years ago to 33 as of last year. And this is key for us in the sense that, being able to rely on a community to quickly respond to a call or local call, as opposed to deploying ships that will have to go hundreds of miles to get to that point, and taking it away from his business of supporting the resupply. So this is those kind of investment that we're looking at. From a marine domain awareness perspective, the Arctic is not well served right now by technology. Internet is extremely slow and so on. And we're really looking forward for the low orbit satellite constellation to be deployed in a few years from now, where we're going to be able to use more technology. So we're not going to be able to recreate the navigation system that we have down south in the Arctic. It would take decades to do that. So we can turn around and look at technology and, things like virtual aids to navigation and so on will be much more accessible. And so that's what the team is focusing right now.
Mr. Thompson, would you like to answer the question as well?
So on the infrastructure side, this isn't an area of significant activity for PSPC. Our main focus is on the vessels, so supporting the Coast Guard in the acquisition and the construction of the Arctic Offshore Patrol Ships 7 and 8, and working on the vessel life extension of the existing fleet. So our focus is very much on the fleet support and getting the vessels that are needed to protect the Arctic.
Thank you. Going back to Ms. Gibbons, we've heard a lot about climate change and its impact in the Arctic and the melting glaciers and so forth. It must have an impact on the marine life there. So, and also with the ship traffic increasing, I'm sure that's impacted the waters as well. How is the department addressing the increased risk of marine pollution?
So I would say that we're doing a number of different things. I mean, in the department generally, we are incorporating into our science assessments, the range of science-related activities in terms of both fisheries management and ocean ecosystems, conservation and protection. We are incorporating climate-related analysis much more integrally in that work on an ongoing basis, and that would include what we do in the Arctic. I think that as well, I mean, the expanded presence of the Coast Guard, and as we bring on the new fleet and we're able to have an even greater presence of vessels in the north, year round, that will also be something that will allow us to, deal better with increasing ship traffic. So there's a lot of different activities that are underway, I would say.
About 20
I
seconds.
don't have a lot of time, but you mentioned in your opening remarks about the Arctic Maritime Security Strategy. Perhaps a quick update, or maybe somebody else can finish asking that question as well.
I'll come back to that if that's okay, Ms. Yip.
Yes,
So
that's
it
fine.
will just ensure we all have a full last round. Madame Saint-Claude-Desgagnés, vous avez la parole pour 6 minutes, s'il vous plaît.
You have 6 minutes. Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'll start by tabling a motion that already has been distributed to other committee members. I'll attempt to read it quickly. I mean, rather slowly, so that everyone gets an opportunity to see it. That pursuant to Section 108.3 of the regulations, the committee do a study of the contracts that the Government of Canada has with Moderna, Sanofi, Pfizer, Medicago, AstraZeneca, Johnson & Johnson, and Novavax for supply and vaccines. Reports 9 and 10 of the Auditor General. That pursuant to Section 108.1, the committee order public service and procurement to produce a copy of each of these contracts, sending them to the clerk of the committee within the 15 days following the adoption of the current motion. As long as that all of these documents be received when they are received by the clerk, that they be available at the office of the clerk for consultation, that no electronic device be available during the day when this is available, no later than 15 days after receiving these contracts, that representatives of Public Service and Procurement Canada be invited to testify for a 2-hour meeting in camera, and during this meeting, only members of the committee and staff be allowed to access the meeting, that no devices be in the room, and that paper copies be handed to the members of the committee that will be handed back to the clerk at the end of the meeting with the instructions to destroy those copies. That motion has already been circulated in both official languages, which the interpreter does not see here, that I am looking forward to having an opportunity to discuss this motion at a later date, but I think this motion is formulated in good faith, and there will be no reason to debate it. Thank you. Thank you for tabling the motion. I stopped the clock, but you now have the floor for 6 minutes. Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'd like to now thank the witnesses for being here today, and I will proceed to questions on report number 6. First off, a question for the Auditor General's office. Let me find my notes. In 2021, you published a report on the National Shipbuilding Strategy. You noted that the NSS had not yet delivered the ships that were required for Canada to meet its obligations nationally and internationally. How were the issues raised related to Arctic surveillance in this report?
Merci. Les navires.
Thank you. The vessels that are covered in this strategy are the same as the ones in this report. There's not much leeway. To have access to those new ships before the life cycle of the current ships is over. All right. So these vessels that are patrolling the Arctic are at the end of their life cycle, which will reduce the capacity to ensure surveillance. Could that have been avoided with a better national shipbuilding strategy? I would say yes. There were delays in the strategy, and now there are shortcomings, problems that should be resolved so Canada may have a full picture of surveillance in Arctic waters. Can you provide some of the most obvious examples of shortcomings? I'd ask my colleague to answer that question. Thank you, Mr. Chair. In the 2021 report, we made some comments as to the fact that there weren't necessarily the right tools available to address risks and to meet the delivery dates or calendars for the production of these vessels, and that was something that we had raised. Okay, are you satisfied with the action plan that was drawn up after this report, and did you follow up on that, given there was another report from the Auditor General's? I mean, have you noticed any improvement in the action plan or in oversight of the production calendar for these vessels? What I would say is that, of course, what we noticed in the second report is that from one point of view, the situation has actually worsened, which means that the action plan had not yet led to the expected results, and some actions were still outstanding, or in the future there remains work to be done. Perfect. Last question on this, Mr. Swales or Mr. Hayes. Who do you attribute these shortcomings to? And when it comes to this action plan, would it be the Department of Fisheries and Oceans or PSPC, Public Service and Procurement? I think that it is a shared responsibility for all departments that are involved in the national shipbuilding strategy. It's a strategy that includes 4 departments, mainly, that need to work together to ensure proper implementation of the strategy. And based on your expert opinion, we know full well that in order to do a task, for a task to be well done, one person at the end of the day has to be responsible. Who do you think should be responsible for instance, watching the calendar? I would say public works could be, or procurement, public works and procurement could be responsible because it can manage those timelines and other results. Mr. Chair, how much time do I have left? A minute, 30 seconds. Perfect. Now a question for Public Works, or Public Service and Procurement Canada. What about this action plan? What about an improvement that had been called for at least 2 years now? Almost 2 years now.
Merci pour la question.
Thank you for the question. As I mentioned, there are a number of aspects of work that are involved in this particular strategy on vessels.
Now for engineering and design for the Arctic and offshore patrol ships. So those ones are contracted and on a revised schedule. We've seen each of these ships being produced at a diminishing unit cost and with less time. We also, in the fall, awarded a construction and engineering contract with Vancouver Shipyard for the initial work on the polar icebreaker, and it would be our intention to have the second polar icebreaker as well as the 6 program icebreakers into the work immediately following the umbrella agreement with Chantier Davy. So there are many contractual elements as well as additional measures we're taking on the management side to have a better handle on risk and on adherence to schedule. So those are 2 tracks of work.
Thank you. The time is up.
Monsieur Desjardins.
Mr. Desjardins, 6 minutes.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair, and I want to thank the witnesses from DFO and the Department of Public Works and Government Services for being here on this important audit. I do note that in several of the Witnesses' remarks this morning, you mentioned partnerships at all levels. In particular, all, quote, involves all levels of government, local, and Indigenous communities. Could the auditor elaborate on the role Inuit communities play in monitoring Arctic waters? And the same question will go to DFO following.
Thank you. It's our view that they play an essential role in monitoring Arctic waters. As much as the equipment is necessary, the satellites are necessary. We were talking about 162,000 kilometers of coastline up there, and the Inuit communities play an integral role in surveillance.
Okay, maybe just to follow up on that before we go to the commissioner, or sorry, the DFO representative. In regards to the actual Inuit people's participation in these programs, in your audit, did you note what levels of participation they had? Are they senior ranking officials in any of this? Are they patrol officers? Are they reserve officers? What kind of status are many of these Inuit folks participating in?
I'm not sure that I can comment on the status. We did talk about an initiative that was developed in collaboration with Inuit communities who can identify the nature and source of information that the systems should provide. However, we did note that that ongoing funding, there were problems with funding intended to support that. So there is a need to address that problem.
And maybe to DFO representative, why is there such an underfunding there? Why would you think the auditor notes that your department is underfunding Inuit folks?
I'm not sure. I think that there's a number of things that we have underway to try to increase Inuit participation in the on-the-water activities and security activities and safety. We've been piloting a community-based coastal marine response network, which is really intended to be an information sharing network of what's happening on the water, what people are seeing. As I said before, we have been funding an increasing number of Inuit communities to participate in the Coast Guard Auxiliary, and that includes the purchase of boats through our community.
Maybe back to the auditor. In your review of it, where were some of the largest deficits in support for Inuit communities, financial deficits that your report notes?
We didn't dig into that question. We were focused in largely on the methods for collaboration and the equipment that needed to be procured. So I don't have an answer for you in terms of where the deficits might be in terms of Inuit support.
And to the DFO representative, you said you were unsure of where those deficits were.
In terms of the report of the Auditor General, I'm speaking to what we have been doing, which is increasing capacity in Inuit communities over time. So we're very, very active. We created this Arctic region for DFO and the Coast Guard, and that's sort of just continually ramping up the capacity.
And what kind of capacity is that for these Inuit communities? Are they, I've never, for example, met, in this committee ever, one Indigenous person ever representing a senior official or a senior ministry in the entirety of public accounts. It's questionable to note that many folks, when they participate in DFO's programming or even other programs of the government, they often find themselves staying at a very nominal position within the ranks of our government and within our civil service and, of course, within DFO. How many Inuit folks would you say are in senior or executive positions in your department? Considering how large and vast the Northern Arctic is and that expertise living there, you'd think maybe even a majority.
Certainly, our Arctic regional office, we are ramping up employees in that.
What's the percentage, though? Give us for Canadians to know.
I don't have the percentage for you. I can get you the percentage.
Yes,
but
please.
I don't have it.
Any employment statistics that are important for the demographic understanding of how the North is actually being, one, monitored, but also by who. It's important that the expertise of Inuit folks are actually held of importance by the ministry and by your officials.
Yes.
With their stories. Inuit people have many, many stories. When I visit them, they know exactly where many ships have gone missing, for example.
Yeah. And that is certainly a goal, both in terms of our employees, the representation of Inuit among our employees, but also in terms of the community-based programming that we are trying to, is to really tap into that knowledge. I would say that our Regional Director General of the new Arctic region is an Inuit person. Yeah.
Excellent. Well, that's good. And I think in terms of the actual supplies, I think it was maybe Public Services mentioned that Inuit folks are participating in maybe not Inuit folks, but people in the north at the very least are participating in a purchase program where their vessels are utilized for the search and maybe rescue or environmental monitoring of certain aspects in the north instead of sending, let's say, a large ship. Mm-hmm. At what rate are Inuit folks participating in that?
So this would be through our community boat program, and so the number of boats, I do have it here somewhere, I can get it for you. I also do have a statistic for you that currently 26% of our Arctic region, our Coast Guard Arctic region have self-identified as Indigenous, and those are mostly Inuit. As I said, the RDG and directors in DFO Arctic as well we do
Thank you very much. That is the time, Mr. Desjardins, but I will back to you, I know. Mr. Cram, you have the floor for 5 minutes, please.
Okay, thank you very much, Mr. Chair, and thank you to all the witnesses for being here today. I find often one of the challenges with a whole of government approach is I'm not too sure to which witness I should be directing my questions to, so I'll just toss these out here, and whoever is best to answer, feel free to chime in. So on page 22 of the report, it talks about the Nanisivik Naval Facility that will be operational for only 4 weeks per year due to its inability to heat its fuel tanks. So what will this naval facility be used for the other 48 weeks of the year?
I think that really is a question for D&D, not us, unfortunately.
Okay. Can the witnesses from Public Works comment on any plans to allow the capacity to heat the fuel tanks of this facility so that it is operational for the entire year?
Thank you for the question. Unfortunately, PSPC is not involved in that project either. That's a question to be directed to Department of National Defense.
All right. Then why don't we move along to, I have a question about something that was not in the report. So Russia has submitted a claim to the United Nations Commission on the Limits of the Continental Shelf and about its claim to the Arctic seabed. And Canada also has a conflicting claim to the Arctic seabed. So I was wondering if any of the witnesses can comment about how our lack of capacity in the Arctic may affect our claim at the United Nations.
I think that in general, we feel that we have the capacity to be able to push our claim forward on that matter.
Does the Government of Canada have any plans to collect new or additional data about the Arctic seabed to strengthen our claims at the United Nations?
We are constantly doing assessments of the seabed, and so I could certainly get you more information on that if you wish.
Yes, if you could provide a written statement to the committee about future plans for future surveys, I would find that helpful. So in June of last year, the Foreign Affairs Minister had a very well-publicized media event with the Prime Minister of Denmark about Hans Island and how we're going to be partitioning Hans Island and sharing that island. Has there been any discussions for cooperation with Denmark about surveying our Arctic waters or monitoring our Arctic waters in cooperation with Denmark around Hans Island?
I think that probably should be directed to Global Affairs.
Okay. What else do I have? Okay, so let's come back to the report then. On page 4 of the report, it talks about a foreign vessel that was identified near Cambridge Bay by an Inuit monitor. Cambridge Bay is about 1,500 kilometers into our Arctic waters. Is it common for a vessel to be able to travel 1,500 kilometers into our Arctic waters before being noticed or identified?
All right, thanks for the question. The said vessel is a Australian sailing vessels, Kiwi Worry, and it was indeed seen by through our Inuit monitoring program, so that proves that that one works. And the requirement for reporting is done through NORREG, which is a Transport Canada lead. A ship of the size of that sailing vessel doesn't require to report. So only ships more than 350 gross tons have to report through NORREG, and this one was a 60-foot sailing vessel, so didn't have to report, but we did monitor all the way through its passage in the Arctic.
So if you monitored it all the way through,
30 seconds.
Why was it able to travel 1,500 kilometers before this Inuit monitor reported it?
Because once we knew the position, we were able to, through the assets that were in place, to monitor and follow it. This first journey into Canadian Arctic, we didn't know it was there, and the ship doesn't require to carry AIS, Automatic Identification System, which is normally what we use to track ships in the Arctic.
Thank you very much. Ms. Bradford, you have the floor for 5 minutes, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you for the witnesses for being here to discuss this very important report. So, Mr. Thompson, since 2015, how many ships have been built in Canada through the National Shipbuilding Strategy?
We have completed 6 large vessels through the National Shipbuilding Strategy, including the 3 delivered Arctic offshore patrol ships that I mentioned earlier. Yeah.
Great. And how many ships were built before 2015 under the strategy?
I don't have that number, unfortunately, at my fingertips. I don't know if Simon does either.
How many large ships were built within the National Shipbuilding prior to 2015? Yes. 0.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, so since the start of the National Shipbuilding Strategy, the signature of the umbrella agreements with Irving Shipbuilding and Vancouver Shipyard, we have built the 6 vessels that my deputy just mentioned.
Okay, that's great. Thank you. So I know that you mentioned that rebuilding the marine industry was very important, and you mentioned that there's, a role for small and medium-sized yards. Now, this 3rd shipyard, you referred to that a few times. Where is that, and when will it be online producing?
So thank you for that question. As I mentioned in my remarks, we're in the very final stages of negotiating the umbrella agreement with Chantier Davy as the 3rd strategic partner to have 3 yards at our disposal for executing the National Shipbuilding Strategy, and that's why it is an important mitigation factor in some of the risks on schedule and volume of work. Having that 3rd partner in place in the coming months will be a really important addition to the NSS.
And where is it located?
In Lévis, Quebec.
Okay. So now I'm just wondering about shipyards like there was the Port Weller Dry Docks that in 2017 was taken over by Heddle Shipyards. Is there any role for these smaller operations to participate in the shipbuilding strategy?
Thank you for that question. We have the 3 strategic partners, which are the large yards, but we have a very active program of work with other shipyards for smaller vessels, for repair and refit work, including Heddle Marine and numerous other companies like it across Canada. So smaller yards and then many small and medium-sized enterprises that play a role in the supply chain as part of the project plans.
Are there any others that are located in Ontario?
I will turn to Simon on that one.
Yeah, thank you for the question. There are others located in Ontario. One good example would be Hike Metal Products in Whitley, Ontario, sorry. They are building with the Chantier Forillon in Quebec the search and rescue boats for the Coast Guard.
Okay, great. So I'll get back and pick up that question that MP Yip was asking, and I believe this is probably for Ms. Gibbons. What are the Interdepartmental Marine Security Working Group's Maritime Domain Awareness and Arctic Maritime Security implementation strategies, and have they been finalized?
So we are in the process of developing the maritime security strategy led by the Coast Guard, but with all of the members of the Marine Security Working Group. So, as I said in my opening remarks, Transport Canada, DND, RCMP, CBSA, DFO. And of course, we're also engaging very closely Indigenous communities in the north. We're expecting to have the strategy completed by June of this year. I don't know if the Commissioner wants to share more on it.
You have 1 minute, Ms. Bradford.
Yeah, the report should be finalized by June, and that will come with an action plan too, looking forward on how we're going to implement it, and basically looking at how the MSUC are working today and what it is that it could improve in the future, and sharing information and so on.
And what is the Marine Security Operations Center Information Sharing Protocol and third-party review? And when will it be able to identify the measures planned to be incorporated and identify gaps in monitoring and assessing?
In June.
All of that happens in
Yes.
June. Okay, that's great. So I think that's probably my time.
You still got 30 seconds.
Oh, okay. So getting back then to Mr. Thompson, what is the economic benefit and impact that the national shipbuilding strategy brings to communities across Canada?
That is a big question. You've got about 20 seconds. So. And I stopped the clock while I talked there. So over.
So rather than trying to summarize it in 20 seconds, I might refer the member to our annual report on the National Shipbuilding Strategy, which has the all the job creation numbers that are updated on an annual basis.
Thank you. I'll be sure to have our analysts grab that report for committee members. So
thank you.
It's a wonderful read, I'm sure. Turning now to Madame Saint-Claude Desgagnés, vous avez parlé pour 2 minutes 30 secondes, s'il vous plaît.
I'd like to follow up with the Auditor General's office, knowing that this is a shared area of responsibility, this national shipbuilding, or the defense, actually, of the Arctic. How would you describe the cooperation between the various departments on this front?
Les ministères devraient
The departments should cooperate to determine the requirements of the strategy. The needs that are to be met by the vessels. I would say that the departments should work with public service and procurement to determine the schedules, etc. Okay, so you have determined there were major shortcomings in the division of responsibilities and communication between the departments. Do you think these risks would be lessened if the roles of each department were more clearly defined? I think the mandates that the departments have are clear. I think it is more to do with implementation. 1.5 minutes. Can you be more specific about this issue? If the roles are well defined, where's the problem? Is it that people aren't doing their work? There are many reasons why projects like this strategy could face delays. It might be a question better addressed to my colleagues.
33 secondes.
33 seconds. If you could answer in 33 seconds what the problem is. If the communication is fine, if the departments know about that, then what's the problem? I can take the question. We have a governance system with the various responsibilities of the 3 departments, the Coast Guard, and their operational demands or requirements, the procurement aspect, which is our responsibility, the economic impact is also addressed by Innovation, Science, and Economic Development Department. So these 3 departments work together to manage risk, and there is a work plan for each of these shipyards. Thank you.
2.5 minutes.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. And just turning now to aspects of testimony that were made by each member in regards to environment. And I think I may have actually seen Mr. Pelche at a different committee, maybe Defense Committee, where we talked a little bit about the utilization of Canada's military equipment in order to actually combat, or when it is deployed to combat environmental catastrophe. And my unique position, I think, in some ways, to suggest that it may not be the best use of those resources. And it was mentioned several times by both the DFO and by Public Services that this is one of the last, one of the areas of last resort for the country. And my question is in direct relationship to the equipment. The audit makes very specific recommendations in relation to the aged equipment and the inadequacy of that equipment, both for monitoring, but also for maybe even some instances. My question would be the environment. Is the fleet, or what we have, what assets we have currently that are in the north, capable of actually responding to environmental catastrophe in the way that Canadians would expect, and are they tailored for that solution? Maybe to Mr. Pelche.
Yeah, thanks for the question. We have, through OPP1, we renewed all our environmental response equipment, and there'll be further investment through OPP2 as well, too. So we're going from, we have 19 cache, environmental response cache in the Arctic. We're updating all the equipment, but also we're engaging with the community to train them on how to use the equipment, how to report, how to assess a spill. And we're hiring people on the ground as well, too. Part of your question earlier was how many people do we have from the north working in the north? Right now, we just finished a selection process where we're going to be bringing a number of environmental response responder in the Arctic.
30 seconds.
Well, thank you for that response. I think that helps me to understand what is happening in the north in terms of capacity building. I think in one area that I'll follow up with in the next round would be in relationship to the Arctic spill. There was an Arctic spill, and what was your folks' response to that, and what are resources that are in deficit to actually ensure that there's a manageable response will be my next question. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much. Mr. Cram, you have the floor for 5 minutes.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Chair. I would like to resume with Mr. Peltier about the issue of the vessel that was spotted near Cambridge Bay. So I didn't quite understand from your previous answer. Was this vessel monitored from the moment it entered Canada's Arctic waters, or did it travel the whole 1,500 kilometers to Cambridge Bay before it was first noticed?
It was in Cambridge Bay that it was first noticed and reported to us.
So could you elaborate on how the vessel was able to travel 1,500 kilometers into our Arctic waters before it was first noticed?
Like I mentioned, the Arctic waters are regulated through the NORREG regulation, so that's mandatory reporting requirement. That's a regulation from Transport Canada, and only ships more than 350 gross tons have to report. Some smaller ship will report on a voluntary basis for safety purposes, and we encourage that. And this is, everywhere on our site, encouraging people to report, because if we know where they are, if they get in trouble, it'd be much easier to get to them as we know where they are. But once we knew the ship was there, we made sure that we were able to monitor its progress all through the Northwest Passage.
And so this particular vessel was spotted by an Inuit monitor near Cambridge Bay.
That's correct.
If this particular Inuit monitor had been sick that day, how far could this vessel have traveled? Could this vessel have traveled all the way through our Arctic waters without being noticed at all?
Well, no, we have ships in the summertime that, when the ice condition allows ships to transit, we have our ships there as well, too, to support community resupply and to be there ready for any intervention, such as search and rescue or environmental response. So we would have crossed paths at some point, but that's why we have the Inuit monitoring program, exactly for that purpose, so that we don't only rely on our assets, we're broadening the network of people that can contribute to marine safety in the Arctic.
So this is more, the pilot project that I referred to earlier, the Coastal Marine Response Network, like that is intended to have lots of eyes, right, on what's happening. It's beyond the Coast Guard Auxiliary and the caches that we have to be able to actually respond.
Okay. Does either of your departments have any statistics on the number of foreign vessels identified by Inuit monitors versus aircraft or satellites?
Very little. The Kiwi Warrior was the first one that I know of. It's very little. I'd say most of the people are very safety oriented and will report, explorers and so on. And most of the traffic in the Arctic right now is a large vessel greater than 350 tons. So we have a line of sight on all of them.
Okay, so when you said very little, do you mean you collect very few statistics, or the numbers identified are very small?
There's the number identified is very small.
Okay, okay. If you could submit a written response to the committee with the actual numbers, I would appreciate that.
Yeah.
Do we have any capabilities of detecting submarines beneath the surface of the water?
That would be more for DND. Coast Guard doesn't have that capability.
Okay. And Mr. Chair, how am I doing for time?
Minute 20.
Okay, I would like to shift now to page 16 of the report, which deals with RadarSat satellites and how that program cannot meet all of the demands of federal organizations for radar imagery. So what are the different federal organizations demanding radar imagery from the RadarSat program?
I can speak for Coast Guard demand. And basically, all the ice coverage information that we receive to RadarSat, both for us and the use of industry, is actually of great quality. If I, look back years ago, what we used to have a black and white TV versus an HD TV, that's what we're getting. I don't know about the condition of the actual satellite, but I have to say that the imagery that we're receiving through Environment Canada and climate change is of great use for both for us and the industry.
Now, the report indicates we will be several years, we'll have a several-year gap between the time the old satellites are retired and new ones come up. And we'll be filling that gap with commercial satellite imagery. Will the quality of the images from commercial satellites be as good as from the RadarSat satellites?
I cannot comment on that. We're getting our imagery from Environment Canada would probably be best to answer this. And this is one layer of information. We also have all our ships up north that do observation, our helicopters that do reconnaissance, and we're starting to use drones more and more as well too. That really gives you the local flavor of that broader picture.
Thank you very, very much. Next up, we have Mr. Fragaskatos. You have the floor for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you to our officials for being here today, and thank you to Mr. Hayes for your work and that of your colleagues. My question, at least my first question, is in response to what was jointly offered by officials in response to recommendation 1. In the response, it says, "We will take a risk-based approach to maritime domain awareness in the Arctic." I suppose this is a conceptual question, but how is risk-based defined? What goes into that? What assumptions, what understandings underpin that?
So I'll start and then ask the commissioner to provide more detail. But that would be a question of all of our activities in terms of where the Coast Guard programs happen each year. Where the cache is that we refer to. Where do we really focus on having a Coast Guard auxiliary? Where is what is the functionality of the Rankin Inlet Station? So all of those pieces would be based on, where do you expect to see the most activity in terms of marine traffic in general?
Yeah, exactly. Depending on the volume of traffic, the area, and so on, this is where the risk-based approach comes from. And basically, we've developed a methodology for search and rescue purposes that we call RAMSARD. So risk-based analysis methodology for search and rescue delivery, and we're developing the same methodology for environmental response going forward as well too. So there will be a common approach for various programs.
Thank you very much. The still with recommendation number 1 and the response, it reads, National Defence, Transport Canada, and Fisheries and Oceans Canada and the Canadian Coast Guard will continue taking steps to reduce gaps in Arctic maritime domain awareness and limitations of existing surveillance capabilities. So what exactly is being done in summary to reduce those gaps? What would you highlight? What would you point to?
So, as I mentioned earlier, the expansion of the Coast Guard Auxiliary is one step to that. The introduction of the Arctic Offshore Patrol Vessel up in the Arctic as well, too. So that will allow me to deploy ships where they're most needed, and at the same time making sure that we have proper coverage. So as we know where the AOPs are going to be, we can redeploy our ship as well, too, to other area that perhaps would have a reduced cover.
And this work is obviously ongoing. What can you say about the progress being made?
Well, we actually have a really good relationship with the Navy. We're actually meeting in a few weeks from now, our annual staff meeting. And basically, we have a concept of operation for a joint operation in the Arctic. The annual meeting is to review it and update it as required. But we're working hands on hands with the Navy.
So hand in hand, I understand that, but what does that look like in concrete terms? How often are you engaged? Or is it, this sounds like a meeting after some time, the way that you phrase it?
No, actually, we're our regional assistant commissioner up north is the building next in Yellowknife next to the JFT North, Joint Task Force North. So we're aware where our respective assets are. I have regular meeting with CJOC here in Ottawa as well too, and just it's meeting at all level of the organization on a regular basis.
The chair tells me I have 1 minute, so I'll stick to that. In 1 year from now, with respect to both recommendations, where do you think we will be? I know you can't inherently predict, obviously, but where do you think we will be in terms of fulfilling these recommendations?
Well, I think we're not going to get a program icebreaker in a year from now. I think the delivery date is scheduled for 2030. So we'll continue to progress on the construction and the negotiation with shipyard from a shipbuilding construction or from a shipbuilding. And on the MDA, I think we're making huge progress. I'd say 10 years ago or 15 years ago, we were one of the world leader in e-navigation. We kind of dialed back due to reduction. But with the investment that we've received through OPP and so on, we're really ramping up our ability and our participation in the international fora, which allow us to have a better understanding and knowledge of marine domain awareness. We're also collaborating with many of the other countries like Denmark, Norway, and so on. And so we are exchanging each other's expertise and benefiting from it.
Thank you very much, Commissioner. To our last round, Mr. McCauley, you have the floor for 5 minutes.
Thanks, Mr. Chair. Mr. Pelletier, I realize you haven't received your AOPS yet, but what period can they patrol up north in the Arctic?
Feedback that we receive from the Navy is that they are much more efficient than they've expected. Typically we're up north from mid-June to end of November, so I expect that during that period we would be able to be there.
What happens November then to June? What replaces those AOPS, or what is the intent?
We deploy 6 to 7 ships every year in the Arctic. We actually had up to 9 during COVID. So at the end of November, when the ship come back from the Arctic, there's basically no more commercial traffic. And there's, again, Transport Canada regulate a certain zone of the Arctic. Certain zones are close to commercial traffic. And, so there's no marine activity beyond the end of June. This year we came back the first week of December.
Okay. What happens, 2030 we hope to have the Diefenbaker in the water, but we've seen delay. So I'm not a betting person, but this one I would take a bet on that it will not be ready 2030. what are the consequences? Like, what do we have operating? Because I don't think our other major icebreakers are going to be operational that late.
The two polar icebreaker, first of all, it's two and not one, which
No,
we're.
but the second one, we haven't even signed for, so we're just talking about the first one, 2030,
Right.
at a C-SPAN.
So we're doubling up on the design work. So we want to make sure that we have a complete design package before we go into construction, and everything is lining up to start construction, cut steel in 2025.
But assuming 2030 doesn't happen, because we haven't seen anything on time with this program, what is your backup?
We're confident that it will happen. If it doesn't, and as we get closer to 2025. We'll be able to assess if there's some slippage and come up with some interim measures that we actually have in place right now, and it worked really well with the medium icebreaker, the three Swedish medium icebreaker, and the light icebreaker as well too. So if we need to look at more interim measures, we will.
The three Swedish ones, are they all operational?
Yes, sir.
Okay. What was the final cost to renovate and work on those? And maybe you can get back to the committee, either PSPC or yourself, get back to us on that if you don't mind.
Yeah, the project cost was 850, if I remember well, but we can give you
to us. What is just the naval AOPS, Mr. Thompson or Mr. Paget, maybe you can answer this. There were some well-publicized issues with the water issues, but also with the diesel generators. What is the costs going to be for that? And what steps have been taken to ensure it doesn't happen on subsequent ships?
Thank you for that question. So the overall program cost for AOPS 1 to 6 is
for the
approximately
problem,
$5 billion.
fixing those
and
items.
there indeed have been some operational issues identified that are the subject of some ongoing work with DND. I don't think we've arrived at a full costed resolution of that, but I'll let Simon.
The diesel, the generator or the engine issue that came up, have we identified who's at fault? I have heard that the shipbuilder actually left equipment out on the docks that was affected by saltwater, et cetera, which was the problem. Have we identified?
We have not yet resolved that issue completely. It's still
that being
under
investigated
discussion.
so that
It is.
will taxpayers be relieved of that cost then and billed back to the
1 minute.
builder if it was determined it was their error?
I'm not in a position today to talk about the outcome of those discussions, but there are active discussions on the issue.
Assuming it was true and Irving was at fault, will taxpayers be let off the hook for that? I think it's a fair question, and we should know that answer.
It's a bit of a hypothetical scenario, but I can let Simon speak to the facts of where we're at on the investigation.
Yeah, thank you for the question, Mr. Chair. The investigation is progressing, and the discussions remain active. To your specific question, when something like that is found, when a problem is found, we do look at where the source of the problem takes.
When do we expect an answer on the cause?
I would say, Mr. Chair, over the next 2 months, we'll have full answers.
So shortly.
Yep.
Wonderful. I assume that's my time, gentlemen. Thanks.
Thank you very much. Ms. Shanahan, you have the floor for 5 minutes, please.
Thank you, Chair. And again, I thank the witnesses for appearing before us today, and I thank you for the work that you do, especially it's very timely that we're having this meeting because the surveillance of Arctic territory is very, very important. Monsieur Pelletier, did I hear you correctly in a previous answer? You said something about 10 years ago we were a leader. I don't know what it was in, but due to cutbacks we were reduced. Can you please expand on that?
15 years ago, 15 years ago, e-navigation was a new concept being introduced, and Canada, we had some pioneers there that were pushing a lot. Through various program reduction, we had to dial back a little bit, but I am happy to report that we're back on top of the list of a worldwide participant in e-navigation.
Well, I'm glad to hear that. I'd just like to understand a little bit more about e-navigation and what was the program reduction? How did that come down?
E-navigation stands for enhanced navigation. Some people will think about electronic navigation, but that's all. So it's making sure that the mariner has the right information at the right time when they need it, and don't have to search. Everything gets funneled through a single point. That's what e-navigation is. Part of that as well too is modernizing equipment, like I mentioned earlier, buoys. Probably in 30 years from now, we'll still have some floating aids to navigation, some floating buoys, but a lot of that will be able to be done electronically as well too, and or virtual we call that, and that allows us to push information if the navigation is not functioning properly, or if one of our marine communication or traffic services site is not working. That's one way that's the mean that we will use to pass on the information.
And would you say that, so I'd like to talk about the decisions to invest in such programs. Are they short-term decisions or long-term decisions? Does it happen that you have to invest in something today and you're only going to see the benefit down the line? Like, why would it be cut back? Was it just not working?
No, I think it was working. There's the available technology too. I mean, we're in the last 10 years, we've all seen, the use of mobile device and so on has increased a lot. The use of the network is much more reliable than it used to be. We don't depend on the physical phone line, which created us some headache in the past. So we did modernize a lot of other things, like our marine communication traffic services, communication towers. That's 185 towers across the country. That there was a single point of failure before. Now we have redundancy all through the system. So we invested in this kind of thing to make sure that the infrastructure was reliable, and now we're starting to invest again in pushing the technology.
So it is important to invest in these technologies, even if they don't show a benefit right away, but over time?
Yeah, that's, in the world of digitalization right now, I think that there's no other options. Everybody that is on the water, not everybody has self-locating device, but they all have their cell phone. And we need to make better use of that. Things like, just if you see some oil in the water, can you report it? You don't have to search for a phone number. We'll have an app dedicated to that, where the person will be able to take a picture and report what they're seeing, so we can take action quicker.
So it would be very short-sighted for, say, an approach to save a few dollars today to cut that kind of an initiative, and then having to come back to it years later when time has marched on. I thank you for that answer. I do understand that data sharing is one of the problems that the Auditor General's office identified. Mr. Hayes, do you have any suggestions here about how that can be improved?
Let me you've got about 40 seconds in total, Ms. Shanahan. Thank you.
I would just point to the fact that we made recommendations to address the long-standing known issues, including the need to get a complete picture, whether the navigation system is a way to do that. I'm not able to answer that, but what we do know is that as traffic is increasing in the north and climate change is making it even more likely that traffic will increase even more, there needs to be a better picture up north.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Madame Saint-Claude-Desgagnés, vous avez la parole pour 2 minutes 30.
2.5 minutes. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'll continue in the same vein with Public Works. In November, there was an announcement regarding Davie Shipyard as being included in the National Shipbuilding Strategy. It was supposed to be concluded by the end of 2022. Where do things stand in terms of the third shipyard being integrated within the National Shipbuilding Strategy? Thank you for the question. As I mentioned, we are almost there. Negotiations are underway and at the heading towards the end of the process, if you will. If my colleague has anything to add? Yes, thank you for the question. Really, we're at the final stages. We've done the largest part of the negotiations, and now really it's about those final details. Why not have an agreement with Davy far earlier, given the size and the capacity of that shipyard for decades now? Thank you for the question. When we received the order to proceed with the qualification of a third shipyard to be included within the national shipbuilding strategy, we started our solicitation process. We met every one of the benchmarks within the process. There was a period where we asked for additional information of this shipyard to make sure that we were doing a very complete job in terms of the technical aspects and the financial side of this shipyard, to make sure they're well positioned to deliver within the strategy. That took some time. But as I said, we're almost there. 30 seconds left. What took so long? Because financial statements are, quite direct, usually. I wouldn't say it was that long. We just stuck with the process. The process is very rigorous. It's, not a small feat to integrate a partner that will be providing a great deal of work. There's a strategic partnership that has to be struck, and it involves a lot of money, and it's a long-term partnership. We wanted to really make sure that all the details had been ironed out. We did the same at the beginning of the strategy with the other two shipyards. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. Now back to my question is for the Commissioner of the Coast Guard in relationship to climate change and your department's or the Coast Guard's resources and able to manage spills potentially or other kind of catastrophic natural disasters that may be present in Canada's Arctic North. And before we left off, I just mentioned about the audit's remarks on the deficits of the equipment. And so in relation to that, are you confident in your department's ability to respond to a major environmental catastrophe in Arctic waters?
When we talk about pollution, it's always a concern. I wouldn't do my job properly if I wasn't concerned about that. I think in Canada there's a principle that is called the polluter pay. So the operator of the vessel is responsible to clean their own pollution. If they don't act properly, we then step in. The people that operate in the Arctic are very responsible. Most of them are actually resupplying the community, so they do not want to leave trace behind, and they are well equipped. But we have equipment on our ship as well too, and we have equipment, like I said, in many caches across the Arctic. We train the local people so they can take action right away if something happens. If we take a number of hours to get there, but action can start immediately. But from experience, whenever there's been a spill, the operator really step in, and they do also do some training with the communities as well too.
But in relationship to, of course, the fact that climate change is going to increase in the Arctic. It's going to have one of the most catastrophic impacts in the north, and it might be one of the areas that Canadians would expect most of the catastrophic damages brought on by climate change to be. And so in relation to that, what is the likelihood of a natural disaster increasing due to shipping lanes that you're talking about, increased traffic due to climate change? Given the fact that climate change will likely increase shipping, the likelihood of increased disaster within those shipping lanes would also increase. Is your department prepared for that increased challenge?
Yeah, we have what we call the Northern Marine Corridor that we've developed as well too, and basically is tracking where the ship are, and they will be the preferred routes that we're going to ask the ships to follow. So this is where we can focus our energy to put the aids to navigation. We can do the proper charting in those corridors. So this is ongoing, and this is exactly in preparing for what you're saying. Plus, this way we can map as well to sensitive areas if there's a bird migration in certain areas. So depending on the time of the year, we can redirect traffic.
Thank you very much, Commissioner. Okay. Mr. Cram, you have the floor for 5 minutes.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Chair. I would like to circle back to page 22 of the report and the Nanisivik Naval Facility. So the report says that for the other 48 weeks of the year, for the rest of the navigation season, the ship's refueling will continue to depend on commercial options or allies cooperation. So I was wondering if you could elaborate what capabilities do our allies have in Canada's Arctic waters that we do not have?
The Coast Guard has been operating in the Arctic for over 60 years, and the way we've refueled our ships is been through tanker that comes from down south. Those tankers are maybe going up to refuel communities, and we use that opportunity to buy fuel as well too. But this is planned months ahead of time. It doesn't happen from an ad hoc perspective. And from the Navy perspective, we did transfer fuel to the Navy in the past as well too. So I cannot speak for their other operation or their intent. But from the Coast Guard perspective, if Nene Civic was operational, we will use it. If not, we'll continue the way we've been going through bringing tanker and barges up north.
And so when you say tankers from down south, you mean down south in Canada or from the United States?
Depending on the procurement, it's mostly down from here, from a company like Degagné, or there's some company that from south that resupply the communities in the Arctic.
Okay, so then maybe I should turn to the Auditor General, Mr. Hayes. So on page 22, when the report says "or our allies' cooperation," what are you referring to? Like, are our allies operating up there right now?
I'll ask Mr. Swales to add to this, but I'll just say that obviously the remoteness of the north makes it difficult to get supplies up there. So there are a number of ways that supplies do travel to the north. Mr. Swales.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Part of what we were referring to there was the use of ports that our allies have. So, for example, ports in Greenland that belong to Denmark, and ports in Alaska that belong to the United States.
Okay, fair enough. I'd like to shift gears now a bit to page 3 of the report. I'd like to read a quote. It says, "Waters are largely not charted to modern or adequate standards." So are there any plans to chart these waters to modern standards?
We are continuously charting. And of course, the way we do it now, the functionality on the ships is much better than it was in years past. And so,
yeah, Andy, we've installed multi-beam sonar on all of our ships. So now whenever the ship is transiting, we can switch it on and collect data that is then sent to the Canadian Hydrographic Services to allow them to update all the charts. But there's been, in the last 6-7 years, a lot of work, a lot of data collected.
And are there any plans for this data to be included in Canada's claim to the Arctic shelf, or the Arctic seabed, in front of the United Nations Commission on the Limits of the Continental Shelf?
I can't speak to the use of the data in the claim, but certainly we can come back to you with more information on that. I think we need to work with Global Affairs.
1 minute, Mr. Graham.
Okay. And in the 1 minute I have left, so Canada presently has, I believe it was 6 icebreakers in operation in the Arctic, and I understand that Russia has about 40. Why are Russia's icebreaking capabilities so much larger than Canada's?
I cannot speak to the Russian capability and priorities and so on. We've been serving the North and it's actually 7 icebreakers that we send every summer. And like I said, a couple of years ago, it was up to 9. And it does the work. We have levels of service that we need to meet for as we provide services to industry, and we may meet those level of service at over 95% of the time.
And that's really about time, Mr. Graham, so thank you. And Mr. Dong, you have 5 minutes, please.
Thank you, Chair, and I want to thank the witnesses for coming today. My first question goes to the Department of Fishery and Oceans, Ms. Gibbons. We heard the earlier on question about the effect of climate change. I want to hear from you. In the last decade or 2 decades. How is climate changing posed a challenge to your department when it comes to the Arctic?
I mean, I think that just the overall changes in the environment are something that would be taken into account as we figure out what our approach is in the Arctic, both fisheries and oceans and the Coast Guard. We've talked extensively, I think, about in the Coast Guard the enabling more marine traffic, and that is something that we need to be equipped to respond to, and we've talked about the various ways that we do that. In terms of other impacts, there are changes to fisheries from climate change, including in the Arctic, and so in some cases there are fisheries there are fish that move north. And salmon, for example, have been moving further north, and so we then make sure that our science assessments for managing different fisheries are fully incorporating those sorts of changes. So those are just a couple of examples.
On the fishery data collection, do we have a system that collects data as to assess the risk on commercial fisheries and maybe guard our waters against piracy fisheries? And any actions on that?
Well, we're involved in a lot of different activities with respect to illegal and unreported fishing, which is a problem all over the world. And that, of course, would include in the Arctic. And part of the way that we participate in working against illegal and unreported fishing is through our involvement in various regional fish management organizations with other countries. So in the Arctic, of course, that would include involvement with Denmark and other countries.
Currently, do we have the capability to work with our allies to defend our water when it comes to illegal fisheries? If not, what investment should the government consider to make sure we do have that capability?
We do work extensively with our allies on it, and we'll be working further with them. The Indo-Pacific strategy, I would note, includes funding for a shared oceans fund, which is intended to be used in part, at least, to do more on illegal and unreported fishing with other countries.
And does your ministry work in silos, or you have ongoing collaboration with Ministry of Defense when it comes to surveillance and the potential threat to our territory or to Arctic territory?
Well, we would be working with DND, the Coast Guard, but we'll be working with DND and DFO's conservation and protection officers as well are very active with their colleagues in the RCMP, for example, on management of conservation and fishery, management of fisheries and management of conservation efforts as well.
You have 1 minute, Mr. Dong.
Okay, and from the legislation side, do we need to do more or offer you more tools to fulfill that responsibility?
The Fisheries Act is updated every 5 years, and there is a further review of the Act coming up in 2024, and certainly in that context, we would take a look at anything that needs to be changed to allow us to better protect fisheries and promote conservation.
Is there a regular interaction between us and the United States on protecting the Arctic on an annual basis, systematically?
There is constant interaction, both within DFO, but also Coast Guard.
Yes, we meet yearly at my level with the U.S. Coast Guard Commandant, and we discuss strategic plans going forward. We exercise together in the Arctic, and we're also part of the Arctic Coast Guard Forum, and both the United States and Canada are a very active participant in this forum.
Thank you both. Thank you. Thank you very much, Mr. Dong. Commissioner, just Chair's prerogative, I just have 2 brief questions. You had mentioned that when vessels come into the Arctic, reporting is voluntary if it's under a certain size. That's interesting because in our Great Lakes, and I represent an area, Passamaquoddy Bay, which is right next to the Bay of Fundy. If any vessel just crosses the international line between Canada and the U.S. of any size, they're required to report in. Why, in your opinion, is that not the case in the north? And if that's not something that's on the books now, is that a cabinet decision, or would Parliament be required to make that change? Do you know?
Well, it would be a regulatory change. Just to correct, if a ship is sailing through Canadian water but doesn't make land, they don't have to report. If they're coming to a port, they have to report 96 hours and 48 hours.
So I will correct you on that. Actually, that changed about 10 years ago to deal with cross-border smuggling, and it was a big change because I use those waters. That just crossing the line, even if you did not disembark in a foreign country, all boaters in the Bay of Fundy, or pardon me, in Passamaquoddy Bay anyway, and the Great Lakes are required to report just by crossing that line. It was a considerable change. My other question is, and very briefly, you had mentioned on the question of Arctic Russia's icebreakers that it's something that you couldn't comment on. Is that because it's a D&D issue, or it's one that you didn't think was relevant to the testimony today?
Well, the construct of the Russia fleet is very different than what we have in Canada, where we have a Coast Guard and we have D&D and a Navy ship. There is kind of a mix. Yeah. So that's why I said okay. I don't exactly know.
No, that fair enough, and that's why. And have there been instances where Russian icebreakers have crossed into our waters or have attempted to do so?
Not that we know of. I mean, we went to the North Pole a number of times to actually map the continental shelf. It happens that the Russians are around there, but never in what is known as Canadian water.
Thank you. I appreciate that. Thank you very, very much. On that, I will thank all the witnesses. Thank you very much for attending. You're excused. I'm going to suspend this meeting just for 2 minutes so members can get organized. We now have some committee business that will take place in public. Witnesses are welcome to stay if they like, but I'm just going to pause for 2 minutes, please. So, is this to speak to the motion or something else?
I want to move that. Sorry, I want to move that the committee move from public to in camera.
All right, just 1 second, please. All right, we will vote on that. Clerk, could you take a roll call to move this meeting in camera?
Ms. Bradford,
In favor?
Mr. Dong,
Yes.
Mr. Fragiscatos,
Yes.
Ms. Shanahan, Ms. Yip,
Yes.
Mr. Veerson, Mr. Cram, Mr. Macaulay,
No.
Madame Saint-Clair Desgagnés,
Non.
Monsieur Desjarlais. Yeas pour 5, nays contre 5.
Well, and I'll vote to keep this meeting in public, and on that, I'm going to turn to Madame Saint-Clair Desgagnés.
Merci, Monsieur le Président.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'll be brief. I know we only have 16 minutes left. For the reasons mentioned, among all parties within this committee, and due to the fact that it is our mandate to go to the very bottom of the reports issued by the Auditor General, and as she states in her letter from February 2022, under the Auditor General's Act and requirements relating to documents, she cannot provide information on the said contracts in a public forum. That's under the Auditor General's Act. So it is up to the committee to ask itself questions as to the options for purchase between the government and these companies, these trade or commercial agreements. There are no lives at risk at this point. There is also no issue of competition between these companies at this point. We know that the pandemic is behind us. Those doses will not be usable, so time has elapsed. It makes sense that at this point, if we turn the page and we learn lessons from the pandemic, it would make sense that the Standing Committee on Public Accounts have access to these contracts. I would close by saying this. The process was undertaken in good faith, and this is why we will look at these documents in camera, in keeping with some limitations as described in the motion, and during a meeting with public PSPC also in camera. We acted in good faith, and we certainly hope wholeheartedly that the government and its representatives will also act in good faith. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Shanahan. I recognize you, please.
It is true that Madame Saint-Clair Desgagnés did discuss this motion with us, and it's not a topic that is unimportant. It was one that was the subject of a full meeting of an Auditor General's report. The Auditor General came back with basically that the job was done. She cannot provide any further details to us, and that's not out of the ordinary. The Auditor General is often in her verification work in a position where she's examining contracts and secure documents, and that is why we have an independent Auditor General, because she has access to those documents, and then she does the analysis, and then she reports back to us. So our role here in public accounts is to look at the reports of the Auditor General. And my concern here, and why I would have liked to have had this meeting in camera, because I think it merits a full and frank discussion with among the members here, is are we in the process now of undermining the role of the Auditor General? So there is that issue. But the second thing is that we have a full calendar. We have a schedule already before us. We are expecting new reports to come in. Our role is to study the work of the Auditor General. I know we're having a minister coming in on Indigenous Affairs, and I think that that's actually, if we're going to be stepping out of the box, that's the box I would like to be stepping out in. For all intents and purposes, and I disagree that that lives are no longer at stake, we don't know what the next thing is coming. And to undermine Also, the ability to work in a commercially sensitive area, well, that's a discussion that may be appropriate to government operations, and we have the good fortune to have Mr. Macaulay here, who is the chair of OGO, and is certainly well versed in those kinds of discussions when we're talking about ongoing work. But I believe that we had a fulsome discussion on last week when the Auditor General and Health Canada and so on were here, and for me, I think it's time to move on.
Madame Saint-Claude Desgagnés.
Je vois malheureusement que la bonne foi.
I see that there's good faith only on one side of this committee. I think it is precisely because we believe in the work of the Auditor General that we want to go to the bottom of her report and understand her conclusion. When she talks about a waste of doses, is it because the pharmaceutical companies took advantage of their position to enter into commercial agreements with the government to the detriment of taxpayers' funds? I mean, that information she couldn't have included because options for purchase cannot be publicly disclosed. We really want to get to the bottom of the Auditor General's report. We appreciate her work, in fact, and that's why we want to have access to the same contracts she saw.
Please.
Thanks, Mr. Chair. And, I support my colleagues from the Block's comments on this. I think we owe it to taxpayers that at least someone is able to access this, their elected officials, and not just their unelected lords and masters in the bureaucracy. We've seen, this information has been public by other governments around the world, America and Europe. I'm concerned about, what the Information Commissioner calls a culture of secrecy within government, where everything that taxpayers should be able to get answers for, or parliamentarians, is blocked. This is not information that's going to be shared outside this room. The motion's been very specific, no phones, etc. And we've seen this before with other committees where we've accessed information in a private room overlooked by the department and the clerk. I see absolutely no reason why elected members by themselves cannot be given access to this that seems to be public in other countries and yet not in Canada. So I fully support the motion as presented, and I hope we can move forward so we can...
Thank you. I'll return to Ms. Shanahan.
Just to reply to my colleague, I understand. I understand not all colleagues are here at all meetings, but we have heard that we can ask analysts to confirm this. We did hear that waste was relating to distribution. It's that 48-hour time frame between the vaccines being received and in the hands of the provinces. Frankly, is my colleague saying that we bought too many? We were right in the midst of a pandemic and lives were at risk. Did we buy too many? Is that the purpose?
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. Just to be clear, I think that originally when we wanted to have this conversation in camera, it was simply in response to the motion itself, which calls for an in-camera meeting. So that's why we moved in that direction. However, that's a moot point now. I think that we have to keep in mind the work plan. I think that we have meetings that have been scheduled, and I know members across the aisle, not just on this side, are very much looking forward to those meetings. This issue, it's not to be dismissed. I'm not saying that it's unimportant, certainly, to my colleague in the Bloc who's put it forward. But I think that we have to keep in mind the work plan itself. And, it can also be taken up at other committees as well. This is something that can be looked at government operations or health. In fact, the member does have the ability to call on those committees to study this. So I think that, for these reasons, and let's also keep in mind, Mr. Chair, you know this very well, just a few days ago, on February 8th, you received a letter from the Auditor General, and let me quote from it. After having consulted internally within my office, I'd like to reaffirm my answer given during the hearing. Due to the restrictive confidentiality clauses in the agreement, I am unable to disclose information about the agreements and related confidential information to the committee. The in-camera nature of a meeting would not affect the obligation to respect the confidentiality provisions in the agreement with the vaccine companies. So, in effect, what the Auditor General is obviously saying here is that she still could not answer our questions in an in-camera meeting. She's not able to do so. So the Committee of Public Accounts has at its core engagement with the Auditor General. If the Auditor General is telling us that she cannot engage with us, then the idea of having this particular meeting is itself moot. So I think that's something that we have to keep in mind, because the result would be that we go ahead with this and it's just us looking at documents. Some of us might be well versed in contracts and contract law and the like, but I'm not sure how far we'd be getting. This is something, again, that can be taken up at other committees that have a more of a mandate to carry out that work. I think we should stick with our work plan and continue with that agenda.
Before I turn to Mr. Dong, just a couple comments. I mean, just so we're all clear, the motion is not calling on the auditor to break her contract with the government. It's calling on Public Service and Procurement Canada to release this information, and for that department to come in and address that. So the auditor is not the target of this motion, and nor should she be. I would have ruled that motion out of order because she has a contractual obligation not to release a document. The government, of course, is answerable to Parliament in this committee. Mr. Dong, you have the floor. I'll make one last comment. The only thing the calendar is far from full, and if we don't resolve this today, this debate will then begin to impact our calendar. Mr. Dong, you have the floor.
Well, thank you very much, Chair, for clarifying this. I voted yes to move the meeting in camera so we can have, straightforward discussions about this, frank comments, but it's not going to stop me now that we are in public. This committee is a highly nonpartisan committee, and we were able to do that, in my mind, is because we study Auditor General's report. So she has already formed an opinion, done her investigate very professionally, nonpartisan. She's not taking any sides. And that's how the system is built. And that's how Canadians entrust this institution. To say that, okay, we got your report, we agree with you, but we want to understand how you come to that conclusion. We want to agree with you more. It doesn't make any sense to me. I mean, she wasn't praising the government. She had her criticisms about bits and pieces throughout, and that's how she formed her recommendations. And I think when we are talking about sensitive information like a contract that the government signed with vaccine companies, and there are only a few proponents out there, and we know very, very, very well that going forward, we still have to deal with these proponents on the procurement side, and now all of a sudden to open up, breach the contract, open up the contract, and for us to take a look, and everything is in public. And I don't believe that what we discuss, even in camera, does not make its way to public. There's so many examples I can use where we have discussions, maybe not in camera, maybe in the committee level, and then it gets mentioned in question period. It's very easy. We're politicians. It's very easy for us to look at something and see from different perspective, and they're using the partisan way. That's our job, to be critiqued at the government. That's our job. I understand that, but when it comes to running a risk of opening something that's confidential, the proponents sign confidentially with the government, and that contract has been looked at and reported on by an independent officer of the Parliament, the Auditor General, and we still want to say, let's open it up, let us take a look. I think we're over the line. And of course, I support my colleague Peter's comment about if you want to look at the procurement details, this is not a committee. This is a committee to look at AG's report. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. I will just I take some exception. Committees as well as parliamentarians see documents all the time in this building that there is a requirement not to divulge it. So I recognize that we're politicians, but if an obligation is made, we are duty bound to uphold it. Mr. Desjardins,
And
you have the floor.
Chair, can I just respond to that?
I'll recognize you after Mr. Desjardins.
No, but that's on my point. I just want to respond
Mr. Dong, I've got time here. I will recognize you. You're back on the list, but I'm going to turn to Mr. Desjardins.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. I do also take exception to the fact that any of us, breach our requirements for in-camera session. I think there's laws that ensure that we can maintain that. Just from a parliamentary position, I don't think we should cast doubt on that procedure because it's an important procedure of Parliament. It's an important procedure for all of us, not just in this committee, but in Canada, in any Western democracy. That is an institution we need to value, no matter which party you represent, no matter what evidence you need to see. That in camera is a very important forum that even the government bench just acknowledged the importance of just a minute ago, motioning to go in camera. If we didn't believe in those principles and how valuable that is, then we wouldn't be utilizing it as a tool of measure. But beyond that, which I think is in some ways offensive, but I know, Han, you weren't meaning it to be offensive to any one member here or accusing any one member here, but I just would like to recommend caution on that. I'm torn on two items of this motion. One is the issue of the calendar. We did, in fact, have a lot of calendar space. So, Chair, just to repeat what you said, do we have time? Do we have enough time to satisfy this request without amending or without changing the existing action plan, in particular consideration with some of the meetings we have with the minister?
So it's my sense we do for Mr. Fragascatos and I. This is deja vu all over again. Given the timelines that it will require the department to get back to us, I mean, we have very little scheduled in March and nothing in April and May. So we can accommodate this without disrupting what we have scheduled currently.
Thank you for that. And then the second portion I have is in relation to what Mr. Fragascatos was saying and what Madam Sinclair Delegany was mentioning in regards to the Auditor General's requirement of confidentiality. That requirement, maybe we get a note from the clerk a little bit about what the requirement of the Auditor General is, especially if she is in camera, and what she can divulge in that setting. Because is the letter saying that she can't divulge any new information, or is she saying that in relationship to the contracts, we would be able to investigate them without her maybe mentioning them?
Well, she can't divulge information.
But she can be present while the report or while the contracts are present, and we can ask.
Possibly, but just one second. Reading this motion, she would not be present.
She would not be present. So
as per this motion, yeah.
And the departments, but the ministry would be. And the letter that she mentioned cited the fact that we'd have to hold the ministry accountable rather than ask her to do that work?
Correct. The government of Canada is a holder of this information, not the auditor.
Okay.
Which is why she directed us back to the government, which is probably where the question should have been posed.
I see.
Initially.
Okay, so that's why her letter mentions the ministry. And so in this case, our colleague from the bloc is recommending that those ministry officials be present. In the instance where they themselves have to discuss the contract, would they also be, subject to the same confidentiality clause as the contract requires?
Well, yes, and that would take place in camera, and like any department, they would be expected to answer questions from this committee in camera, as per this.
And the ministry wouldn't breach the requirement of confidentiality if present in camera?
I don't know if I want to answer that question. I would think not, but the government might have a different position on that. As again, for Mrs. Fragascatos and I, this is deja vu all over again. We did this on Canada, China, and there could very well be objections from the government. I just can't speak to that.
So there is subject to. Sorry, go ahead, Natalie. My one last question was: would the government come into, would we be putting Canadians at risk if these ministry officials divulge information that breached the contract with this company? Would we then be?
So you're raising
liable?
lots of questions here, and I'll probably maybe a nod to Mr. Fragascato as the Parliamentary Secretary. He might want to answer some of these. He's not obliged to. Look, there are three routes that if the committee adopts this this motion here, and then I'm going to turn to Mr. Dong before the time runs out. One, the government can provide the information. That's obviously the easiest from the committee's point of view, should it pass this motion. It can refuse, which then returns it to this committee, at which point the committee can either let it go or elevate it, and by elevating it, it would go to the House of Commons for review, at which point the House could then vote and order the government to release this information to this committee. So can I turn it over to Mr. Dong? Mr. Desjardins, we'll come back to you. We're obviously not going to solve this now, and I do plan to suspend this meeting when the time runs out. And I do see speakers here, but we will definitely pick it up, and I'll keep the list. Mr. Dong, you have the floor, and then I believe it's Ms. Shanahan.
Thank you, Chair. To Mr. Desjardins, I wasn't trying to be offensive to anybody on this committee, and we are quite collegial here at this committee. My point is that, you know, we have an Auditor General responding to us in writing, saying that she's not in a position to divulge this information as pertain to the confidentiality of these contracts. But we're okay to move beyond to that point and ask the government officials whether or not they can divulge those information. And I know exactly how this is going to play out. We're going to put the government officials in a very awkward position, because if they say, no, we cannot, and which is the same answer as the Auditor General, then they will be criticized. The government will be criticized for hiding information. So we're, as committee members, you know, we cannot, and I know that the public wouldn't support that. We cannot accuse or criticize the AG for not divulging the information, but we sure, you know, politicians, it's our right, it's our job to criticize the government for doing the same thing. And I think it's a little unfair in this situation. And as to how sensitive and how the confidentiality clause, or whether or not how tight seal the contracts were, I think maybe we should ask the law clerk, you know, saying, and with this, is this like, are we entering knowingly or unknowingly entering a legal minefield that you know, asking for these details of these contracts to be you know, to be looked at by politicians and their staff in their office and so on and so forth. So maybe we should have a meeting with the law clerk.
Thank you very much, Mr. Dong. Ms. Shanahan, you have the floor.
Chair, I understand that you do want to suspend this meeting. I think there's a lot of questions
Sure.
going on, and the legal questions, I would like to have a fulsome answer on that, because we cannot ask government officials to break a confidentiality agreement when that might be legally, criminally against them, and I certainly don't want to be in that position.
All right. Well, I will suspend right after my remarks. So, the government is answerable to Parliament in this committee, and if the committee requests the documents, the government is duty bound to provide them. In my experience, the law clerk will have comments, and I'll speak to our clerk about perhaps seeing what's been done in the past. But I can speak to other committees I was on that, given what Madame St-Clair has proposed to keep this information private, actually goes above and beyond what a parliamentary committee is required to do. We in fact, as a committee, could order the government, request the government provide this information without any shield or cover. So I think what Madame Dingali is proposing to do is the same process we saw with the Afghan detainee documents from the Government of Canada in the previous Conservative government, as well as what Canada-China attempted to get from the Liberal government more recently. So there is precedent for what Madame St-Clair is proposing, and in fact, she's put in place mechanisms, I think, that will ensure that sensitive information is protected. But I will say, she did not have to do that. The committee could ask for this information and not concern itself with the maintaining any confidentiality. The fact she's done that goes a long way, and I think answers the question of does it safeguard the information? My view is it does from experience, but we can check on that. On that note, I'm going to merely suspend this meeting, and we will pick it up on Thursday, February the 16th at our committee time. Oh, just 1 second.
Est-ce qu'on peut appeler au vote, peut-être?
Can we call for a vote? Perhaps everyone's ready?
Got a call for a vote. Yeah. Well, no, and I'm going to. I hadn't hit the gavel, so that is a debatable motion. So I can see from the response it's not going to be resolved quickly. So I will suspend this meeting.